Hi, good morning, Brooke. Good morning, everybody. So, my name is Dennis Stevens, and I'm the co founder and chief methodologist of Leading Agile. Today, I'm going to talk about four things all Agile organizations have in common. Over the course of the last 11 years, this space where Leading Agile operates is helping companies become more responsive to the market. And we see organizations that are doing it well, we see organizations that are struggling with it, and there are some very, very clear patterns about what has to be true in an organization for them to be able to be responsive to the market. So, four things all Agile organizations have in common. If you are interested, we have a conference that we did last year called Elevate Agile, and you can get on-demand access to go watch those talks. It was me, Chris Beal, Brian Sonnegaard, Melissa Oberg, and our founder and CEO, Mike Kottmeyer, all did talks talking through some of these topics, but just more broadly addressing agility at scale. If you'd like to watch it, just text SYSTEM to 1-844-414-9981 or click on the QR code. I'll have this slide up again at the end so you can get there, but it's a chance to go listen to presentations on topics in the same area. The agenda, I'm going to talk about a little bit about what does it mean to be agile. I'm going to go through the four things and then go through what does it take to actually get there, to get these four things in place. The starting point of what does it mean to be agile. So agile doesn't mean you're running safe. It doesn't mean you're running Scrum. It doesn't mean you have a set of practices in place. It doesn't mean you have a lot of people trained. Those things can all be necessary components of an organization becoming agile. But agile means that you can respond to the market in a sustainable way. You can sense and respond and get things to the market aligned with your strategy in a sustainable way. You can move faster than your competition where you need to, but you can also maintain your technology health. You can maintain your spend while accomplishing your organizational goals. It means that you have the ability to move at the speed in a sustainable way, organizationally sustainable, from a technology sustainable phase. We see in a lot of organizations people that move really fast on new initiatives, but the cost of maintaining or sustaining those over time go up dramatically. Or we see people that might be able to move really fast, but then can't move fast after they get the process started. So there's an awful lot of things that are important. It's not just about getting the next thing out or being able to operate on new projects rapidly. It's about being able to build a sustainable approach to moving at the speed of the market. So when I'm looking at organizations that can do that, these are the patterns that we're trying to unravel. The four things are: structures are aligned with value. We're going to talk about this some, but when I talk about structures, in a lot of organizations, there's formal organizational structures. Then there's what we would call the value structure, the way teams are organized. There tend to be, in most organizations that have done any project work or things like that, there tend to be the matrixed sort of organization where you have teams getting work done around projects or initiatives or crises, but then you've got like a formal organizational structure. That matrix is important in most organizations to have in place, but we have to be able to get to well-formed, value-based structures that are meaningful, that connect directly with value, not just with the next crisis or the next project. Governance, the way that we make decisions in organizations, and the way that we allow delegation to take place, the way that we maintain the safety of our organization's assets, those things, the governance has to enable the flow of value. In many organizations, we find that governance is a place where everybody can say no, but nobody can say yes. It becomes very difficult for us to move work through an organization. We want organizations that can move fast have aligned their governance with the flow of value, not just locally optimizing to mitigate risks. We have to be able to measure the right things. In some organizations, metrics are used as scorekeepers to blame people, to find fault. But we have to be able to measure the right things. Knowing the progress and our ability to make promises is important. But there's a broader scope of cross-cutting concerns that we want to be able to pay attention to. So a good measurement system that helps us understand how our organization is performing against our goals is important. And we also want to measure how well our governance model is set up and how well our structures are performing. And the final one is they have a plan for change. Making these changes in an intentional process. It's not go and do some training and hope that it emerges. So having an intentional change, an intentional plan for change is one of the aspects that we see in most organizations. Let me go into some detail on those. Structures aligned with value. We want to be able to get the work that we're doing on a team, the solutions we're building, and the service in the organization we provide to support those solutions need to be aligned so that we're making work flow through to the customer. When we have siloed organizations or we have projects around development, but we're colliding with other parts of the organization, our organizational structure can get in the way. Again, you can do this either by changing your formal structure, or you can build value-based structures, value-aligned structures in the organization of teams from customer through portfolio and product down to delivery and aligning the services. You can have them be independent of your formal structure, or you can eventually align your value structure with your formal structure. But there are a couple of important things around this structure. The first one is that they're relatively persistent teaming structures. We know which teams own which capabilities or which assets or which value streams in the organization. We know who's responsible for customer experience and for aligning the work at the value tier into those teams. There's teams at each of those areas, and they stay relatively persistent over time. So spinning up projects and pulling people into a billion different places so that people are not actually within a stable team is a failure mode. Organizations that can build a stable, value-aligned structure is critical. We also find that to be enabled by technology. What's really interesting to me is when we go into organizations that have really good DevOps or really, really good technology, but their organization isn't set up so the teams building things, the teams providing the solutions, can't connect through the organization with the value that we're offering or directly with the customers. When that lack of alignment is there, you can have very, very competent technical skills, but we may not be leveraging them to increase the flow of value. This is a critical building block for successful organizations, in that if you are successful building in practices and technical practices and management practices and doing all these other things, but you haven't built your organizational structure to exploit it, you may not produce the results. As a matter of fact, a first failure mode that we often see in most organizations we go into is they've invested in practices, they've invested in technology, but they haven't fixed their formal organizational structure. So persistent structures enabled by technology and solving problems with the customer. So Eric is talking about we've been agile for many years now, but release 4 times a year. How about the rest of you? Yeah, so I think that's an interesting conversation, Eric, about what agile actually means. Does agile mean if releasing 4 times a year is sufficient to move at the speed of the market and remain competitive? I think that's a very powerful. I think that's sufficient. And some parts of the organization may need to move faster. So it becomes interesting, which is moving as fast as you need to be sustainable while meeting the needs of your market. I think that's sufficiently agile. So it's going to be interesting. Some of y'all, you have Hoopla, you have the ability to comment. Any questions or thoughts around what I'm talking about? The structures are aligned with value. You have relatively stable teams. You have a way to connect those teams directly to the customer, probably through some organizational structures. We talk about product teams or portfolio teams, relatively persistent teaming structures. We've got technology focused on the movement, the flow, end-to-end flow, not just optimizing locally. And we have the ability to make sure that the work that's being done is directly connected to the solving of customers' problems. In the next section, we talk about governance enables the flow of value. We have the rules of the game, the rules of how we're operating inside the organization. And most people think governance is a bad word, but governance is the formalization of our decision-making processes. It's the formalization of collaborations that have to take place before we put product into the hands of our customers and how we sustain that work. It helps us decide economic trade-offs in decision-making and where we're going. So an important aspect of governance is that it's ensuring the most valuable things are worked on. A failure mode in many organizations is that the teams are actually order taking and they have very little ability to connect the things that they're working on to the most valuable things for the customer. It's hard to differentiate between what's just a problem to be solved and what's a problem that solving will help us move in the direction of our strategy. We see the inability to connect that value, to connect and understand the value being a leading cause of organizations not being able to be agile. I was working with a client a couple weeks ago, and one of the parts of the organization was working on a piece of firmware that was necessary to enable an update to firmware that was necessary to enable a new feature set that was being released in the support part of their product. Well, the firmware wasn't on track, and the team didn't prioritize it because they had 3 other things to work on, and so they didn't work on the most important feature first. They worked on some other things. Now, they didn't work on it for some reasons that were, we didn't have the requirements clear, we're waiting for an answer to this. There were reasons why they weren't, but the organization wasn't aware of it. Their governance didn't allow for the transparency and collaboration that would have made that problem be aware in time for us to actually act on it and solve the problem. So the feature can't go out in the next release because the firmware dependency has not been resolved. So when you can't encapsulate everything, your governance model has to really align and orchestrate value across those dependencies. A lot of organizations try to do that in real time, like in a Scrum of Scrums, or maybe in a PI planning increment. But what happens when that PI planning increment overcommits a piece of capacity that's not necessarily directly in that value chain, that release train, overcommits that piece of capacity because there's 3 different or release trains depending on it. That sort of conversation happens frequently because very few of us actually have teams that can totally work autonomously. It happens within teams and getting the testing as well. A lot of times everybody works on everything for the whole period of the release, and then everything goes to testing on the last day. How do we create the transparency and the interactions and collaboration to make sure we're working on the most valuable things across a release or across an organization? So our governance model has to do that explicitly. We have to manage risk effectively. So things like, I'm going to roll it into my data center. I'm going to need to make some changes to my network. I need to protect PII. I need to make sure it performs well. I need to make sure it's on brand, that the labeling on the pages is consistent and the colors on the pages are consistent. The graphics on the pages are consistent with our story. I need to be able to roll it into my test frameworks, or roll it into my monitoring frameworks, or roll it into my support frameworks meaningfully. Well, in a lot of cases, we don't engage those conversations early. We're not managing risk effectively because we're not engaging those conversations early. We're engaging them too late. And so everybody can say no, but nobody can say yes. A lot of us look at managing risk, these risk management things in our governance model, as things that get in the way, but they're necessary attributes. And so we have to build them into our decision-making framework in the right timing. And this is the last one, ties back to the first 2, which is decision rights are actively integrated into the flow of work. When do we engage people in solution visioning, including how we're going to roll it out and support it and monitor it and risk mitigate the release? Who has to be in the room? What's the cadence for meeting? And it isn't actually possible to do it all on the front end, because then there's too much overload and maybe not enough known. So our governance has to focus on flow, the focus on the flow of value, the managing of risk, and the integration of decision rights across the board. Am I getting other comments, or there's just no comments on the hoopla? Or am I not looking at the hoopla?
Look at the Zoom chat.
I want to look at the hoopla. I wonder if there's questions on the hoopla I can't see.
It'll take a second.
This is us working on this remote technology for the first time. I apologize for not being more prepared for it. Organizations that are successful at being agile measure the right things. There's a bunch of reasons why we have to measure the right things. There is a belief that if we just trust the teams in some organizations, if we just trust the teams, that they will be able to be successful, and we can count on them. Okay, so there's some questions for me that somebody put up for a poll. There's a belief that if we just trust the teams, that they will be successful, and there's some pressure sometimes in the Agile community that metrics are bad, that measuring velocity or defects and things like that are inappropriate. But it is absolutely necessary for three reasons for us to have good metrics in an organization. The first reason is, if we don't measure it, it's unreasonable to expect the organization to just trust the teams. It's unreasonable for us to say, hey, I'm not going to hold you accountable. I'm just going to feel good about whatever you're working on. We have to have really, really clear measures of performance so we can fund it, we can support it, we can earn the support and trust of management. There's this concept of trust the teams, and I'm suggesting that we have to be trustworthy to trust the team. So how do we demonstrate trustworthiness? It's with results and with metrics. And so we want to be able to measure the right things. One really important one is, how do we measure the transformation itself? How do we measure the changes that we're making to the organization? And are they resulting in progress in those changes? Are we elevating our competencies? And are we actually maintaining and improving our technology health? There's an interesting conversation around vanity metrics and transformation. How many people got trained in SAFe? How many people have their CSPO or CSPO? While those are important attributes of moving, they're not actually sufficient indications of whether we're moving in the right progress. How many of the teams are actually aligned with value and can get clear backlogs and can deliver frequently to a point that we can test it and validate it and receive feedback? Whether we're releasing or not, we can get there frequently. And it's also interesting that if we measure the transformation correctly, we can start to talk about things, financial gains of going agile. So things like improving our CapEx, or improving our efficiency, getting more work out of the team for the same dollars. These are the types of things that we can use to earn trust and get insights from leadership on progress. And if we do these things right, we're pretty sure that we're actually going to get the benefit that we want from the work we're doing, but we have to be able to demonstrate it in a way that measures value. So understanding that having teams be more productive, reducing overhead, reducing churn, reducing bug fixes, reducing those things leads to financial improvements. So I want to be able to tie the work we're doing and the changes we're making directly to financial benefits. We do need to be able to measure the work in the system. How much stuff is in flight? How much can we produce in a period of time? Where are we in our burn-ups as far as producing the work that's expected so we can set and manage expectations? How is the quality of the work that we're doing as far as its usability? How is the quality of the work we're doing as far as whether it breaks or not? These managing the work in the system, throughput, quality, burnups, other things like that, can all be turned directly into productivity dollars. Now I'm talking about for the people that are producing work, they're producing more at a higher quality. There's also a benefit of predictability here, being able to do the things we say we'll do, being able to achieve the goals that we said we would when we are, showing where we are. This is the transparency, and it has to be across the board. But organizations that are really, really good at being agile have earned the trust of the organization and learned how to leverage the performance of the organization to maximize value delivered. Then the last metric that we want to measure is market success. Market success is actually really interesting because Agile won't necessarily give you market success. Agile, when done effectively, is about moving faster, being able to get feedback more frequently. So being able to measure market success. What's important in the systems we can put in place, though, is that we can put in place boundaries of what we expected to happen in the market or with our customers or with our ability to perform or with our usability, with the pieces of work that we put into the system. So we can have measures on each epic. I'm going to fund an epic. I expect it's going to solve this problem for this customer, and I'm going to see this benefit from it. There's value to being able to set an expectation and then measure it at some point in the future. If we miss, because our Agile system is intentional, well designed, we can go back and put in practices or organizational design changes that do a better job of responding to the market. OKRs are another sort of broader way to set expectations across the organization of what problems we're solving and why we're solving them and how we're going to measure whether we've solved them or not. So OKRs become a powerful tool for setting boundaries for market success. And then our governance model, our flow of decision making, creates a cadence where we can measure and assess those things and make decisions about improving the design of our system and about improving our decision making. So setting the stage for, are we making progress on our transformation? And the benefits of it can be seen financially as well as in the health of the organization and our technology. Are we getting the work through the system we said we would, and are we accelerating our ability to get work through the system? Are we able to provide transparency in what we're making progress on so that we can make trade-off decisions? I was working on an intelligent agriculture system at one point, and we got to about 3 or 4 months into this product development that we were doing, and we realized that we couldn't do what was in scope the way it was in scope by March when the cotton starts growing to roll this product out to the market. And so we got together with the team and came up with some options to achieve the goal of being able to provide smart intelligence in the way that fertilizers and materials were delivered to the field through the boom on the front of the tractor. And we came up with some options, and I went in front of the control group, the board at the time, and I said, here's the thing, we can't do what was promised, but I have 3 options. And the guy that ran the group looked at me and said, this makes no sense. We never have, this Agile stuff makes no sense. I knew it wouldn't work here. We never have these types of problems in our typical projects till we're 80 or 90% of the way done. And I wanted to explain to him that having options, because we had transparency into progress, we knew what our risks were and how we were making progress against our risks, that was actually a better place to be. He understood it like about 10 minutes later, and we were able to make a decision and release the product to the market, even though it wasn't the way it was originally envisioned. So there's productivity and trust that's gained through the transparency and the early feedback mechanisms. The market success comes from being able to try things and react to the market better and verify your assumptions in market through the work that you're actually doing. We talk about an organization being hypothesis driven, or these are all experiments. But if we don't show how we're going to validate the experiments, we assume if we do this, we'll get this benefit. Let's go do just enough of it to validate that. That's important learning. That has to be built into large, complex organizations in the way that we manage the flow of value. That doesn't happen by accident or happen really dynamically. And I don't think that it happens in an emergent sort of just let the teams figure it out kind of way. So we have to be really, really clear on how we're going to measure and what we're measuring. And I think it's important to be able to turn all of our successes into benefits that matter at an executive level. So financial benefits, predictable benefits around predictability and quality, around our ability to make and keep promises, around building trust within the organization and with our customers. So the fourth item that we see for organizations that are successful, what they have in place, is that they actually have a plan for change. The end state where they're going is designed, not emergent. Organizations that go in and say, let's just run some Scrum, let's use some feedback, let's let everybody figure out their own model for doing this, that emergent sort of bottom-up thing, well, it's a good way to get some grassroots and build some emotion around it, because those teams will feel better and they'll be able to, in a vacuum, or in isolation, they'll be operating better. But they won't necessarily be able to respond to the market faster. So at some point, we've got to figure out how to take what small team Agile does for us and turn it into what it looks like to have a design solution where our structures are set up right and our governance model is intentionally integrating decision rights and we're measuring the right things so we have transparency to make the right decisions about the product. We have clarity on our competencies to make the right decisions about the changes that we're making, and we understand what we're expecting in a market if we're achieving it. So an intentional plan where the change is designed but not emergent is something that's necessary. This, by the way, is a change management activity. Getting these systems in place is a change management activity as much or more than it is a getting Agile right activity. Having a perfect, doing practices around Agile things perfectly, but not having a design for the organization that will lead those to be the way to operate is often failure mode. So we need a designed, not emergent plan. I believe it has to be progressive, not big bang. Building the muscles of planning and coordinating, building the muscles of understanding your customer and being able to come up with experiments and pivot on it. Building the muscle of delivering frequently with safety in secure ways into your organization, all those take time. Many of those are enabled by technologies and policies in the organization, which take time to evolve. I can't operate as small, independent, Agile teams directly in contact with the customer when my infrastructure doesn't support it, or my dependencies don't support it, or the work that I want to do doesn't support it. I want to be able to set up a set of experiments around my organization, set up a very clear within my design the next slice that we're going to do, and go implement that. We want to be able to align all the interests that affect becoming able to respond to the market at customer speed. When we align all those interests, because those dependencies between them have to align with each other. Having great DevOps in place when I can't do CI/CD, or when I can't get a team to get a clear backlog to deliver anything, we're not going to get the business benefit from that. So what is the right sequence, the right order of understanding how to move the organization? Is it equally important to move the whole organization to the same place or not in my design? And if not, what slices are most important to move first? What parts of the organization are most important to move first? So designed, progressive, and program managed. The concept of grassroots Agile in an enterprise taking place and just being allowed to flourish is uncommon, especially in bigger organizations that have existed for time and don't understand how to exploit the team level delivery. So coming up with a plan and managing progress against that plan, the progressive plan that you've done towards your designed end, this creates a lot of safety for leaders and managers and executives that have to support this and trust it and see where we're going. One of the reasons why we end up with a lack of traction in a lot of organizations is we run into a barrier at the manager level or the director level, or we don't get the executive support that we want. A lot of those barriers or obstacles come from a lack of safety, a lack of understanding of where we're going and why we're going there. But if we took this model, so how do you get there? So if we have an intentional design about our structures aligned with value, where do I need to form teams? What am I going to align those teams with? And how am I going to make sure those teams are successful? And it's all the way customer. How are we going to get backlogs that are connected to the customer in front of teams? How am I going to orchestrate dependencies between teams? How am I going to make sure that my ability to connect the work that every team is doing is aligned with value? A plan around that, a clear designed end state, a clear plan to get there, and then how am I going to program manage making those changes in the organization? How am I going to how am I then going to govern the flow of decisions within these teams and connect that work together? What has to be true for this set of decisions for teams to operate autonomously? While they have to be orchestrated, where are those decisions made? When I don't have funding for products but funding for projects, how am I going to make those changes? When my technology doesn't support autonomy even between release trains, how am I going to orchestrate and coordinate that and involve them in the planning? How am I going to do the smallest thing possible where I need to be exploring in the market and be able to get that feedback out? Is it possible that some parts of my organization need to move faster than others? So all those things have to be like thoughtfully designed, built into your plan, and then program managed, aligning all the interest in the organization to get your governance model in place. Measuring the right things. So we've got a plan that we've built some trust around. We've said that plan is going to produce results and outcomes that the organization will support. So let's just leave it there. We've told a story about where we're going. How do we call our shots? How do we prove that the changes we're making to our structures and our governance model, and that we're building the conditions for methodologies like SAFe and LESS and Scrum and Scrum of Scrums? We're creating the conditions for them to be successful, right? What are we measuring along that roadmap? Here's your progress against the plan that you built. Here is how we're program managing these changes, and you can see that we can measure and demonstrate results as we're going. We can demonstrate results in progress in the transformation. We can demonstrate results in throughput and quality. We can translate those into dollars saved, and we can show you where we're able to measure success in the market and better adapt and respond to the market. So we have built a plan around this intentionally, and then have a plan for change. The coming up, I think most of the organizations coming, even when they're trying to do things right, they're operating in too small of a segment. They're operating with practices, not with the system design of structures and governance. They're constrained by challenges in the organization. They're not moving, and then they're not using the metrics to measure and move the right things. So I'm going to try to get the measurements to prove that the change making of governance and structures are there. I'm going to tie them to my plan, and I'm going to show each investment and change you're making moves you in the right direction. The last and most important, and sort of like the bonus fifth thing, but it's really important, you can't do these things without having leadership engaged. It becomes really, really important for leadership to understand that the challenges to agility are not just practices or just technology or just culture. The challenges to agility are, how are my teams set up? Organizations that don't have teams aligned with value are going to struggle to deliver value. Organizations that don't have their decision rights integrated, holistic decision rights integrated into an intentional flow of value are going to struggle. Organizations that are leading the wrong things are going to struggle. Organizations that think that you're just going to run some training and it's going to emerge and behave differently are going to struggle. So we have to get leadership to understand and that the obstacles are in the design of the system. They're in our structures and our governance and our metrics and our approach to change. So we want to get leadership to start working on the system, not in the system. Organizations that are having success, that are moving successfully, have leadership that understands their job is to change the system, not go micromanage crises and tasks within the system. It is incumbent upon us as agile people in the organization and change managers to go sell business results to leadership. Business owners don't want, leadership doesn't want agile. Leadership doesn't want Scrum. Leadership doesn't want DevOps. Leadership wants an organization that can respond to the market at market speed and do it in a sustainable fashion. So these agile structures end to end are the right ways to get there. If we can get leadership to understand that, not selling the benefits of collaboration or the benefits of, well, those are real, but we try to sell it on the cultural and the mindset benefits, or we try to sell it on the process or the flow benefits. I think we have to get leadership to understand what are the impediments to operating their organization so it can respond at market speed in a sustainable way, and what help we need from them to make those changes. The obstacles that I see around this are when we don't have those conversations and give them the leverage points and create safety for leadership to lead it. They're going to continue to feel like they have to push work into the system or micromanage work in the system. So we got to give them an option, a picture, and a story that gets there. And in fact, we haven't seen very many organizations do Agile sustainably that haven't changed the way their value structure is defined, that haven't integrated decision rights into an intentional governance model, and that are measuring and using metrics in the wrong plan. So Eric, the two questions I have on my board, one says, we've been doing Agile for many years now, but only reached 4 times a year. I tried to answer that one. And the other one is anyone using SAFe opinions? Brad or Andy or Brooke, am I missing questions on the hoopta? Like I'm not looking at the right thing? Because I'm trying to get some dynamic feedback and I'm not seeing any interaction.
Do you have the Hoova chat up?
I think I do.
Yeah, Dennis, the question that I see in the Hoova chat is that from Erin Hill, she sees your title as Chief Methodologist. What's your favorite Agile framework or approach for large organizations and why?
Yeah, that was the one question I saw. That's under Q&A, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
So I have one question in my chat. Well, I have some time here for any questions that y'all want to get clarity on this, or I'm happy to talk a little bit more about why it's so important to drive the change management aspects of this. I don't have a favorite Agile framework or approach. I think that different Agile frameworks are appropriate for different circumstances. They've all been successful when the right conditions existed. They've all been implemented and struggled when they're not. I think it's really interesting to understand what conditions were appropriate and what did it mean to operate at market speed sustainably, to understand where those methods fit. So SAFe might work great when you have relative autonomy or independence of movement within the part of the organization that makes up a release train. And you've got clarity on your strategy, and what you're going for is predictability and alignment. So SAFe solves a group of problems and does it really, really well. The question is what has to be true about your structures, what has to be true about your governance, and what are you measuring and managing, and what does it mean to be moving at market speed in a sustainable way, and are all the conditions in place around that for SAFe to be successful. The same is true of Scrum, same is true of Less, the same is true of Scrum of Scrums. The same is actually true of sort of large-scale program managed waterfall projects. Although the problem with waterfall projects is not how much upfront planning you do, it's how often you get feedback and when you get feedback so you can adjust. So you can tweak, and if you look at what PMI did with project management around the software extension of the PMBOK, which I was the vice chair on building that with PMI, you can see what big upfront designed solutions look like and how Agile is a necessary component of delivering it. So what matters is not the methodology, it's what methodology is appropriate for the market speed you're trying to move at, and what sustainability means for you, and what conditions have to exist for that. Because they're all appropriate in the right conditions, and they're all wrong or would be less than effective in the wrong conditions. How was that for an answer, Aaron? All right. So let me just do this real quick. And there's a couple more chats up here now.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so Eric Myers asked the group, is anyone using SAFe, and opinions for that? Yeah, so if someone's using SAFe and you're having less than great success, do any of these things resonate with you? Maybe we don't have the right teaming structures in place with the right autonomy of movement or the right independence of movement within my release train. Maybe we're only operating part way up the end-to-end stack and we run into the data center or our performance testing or our PII or some other governance benchmark. Maybe we're not measuring the right things, or we don't have transparency on the actual flow within the PI. We're just hoping that everything will come together in the PI because we did the plan up front. If anybody's using SAFe, do you have these conditions in place if it's working, or if you don't, do you see the impact of not having those in place? Okay. So I think the challenge is, the way of thinking around all this is, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish in your organization, the goal is not to implement a methodology. The goal is not to implement a set of practices. The goal is not to implement a set of technologies. Those technologies, those practices, those methodologies exist to help your organization more effectively respond to the market in a sustainable way. The interesting challenges are, what conditions must exist around your team design and the way that you're connected end to end, around your governance model and how you make decision making and how you connect decisions end to end. What do you measure and what do people have transparency to so they can respond to the design of your system or to the flow of work? And what is your plan to put compensating controls in to your methodology or your technology or your practices? If the conditions don't exist, how are you thinking about it and compensating? And what is your plan to move out? And then finally, how are you using this type of a story to align executives with the story that you're doing, so that you can get the response that you need to from the organization? Doing this at a low level in a vacuum can be very, very challenging, and I don't think we can do it sustainably without the support of leadership. I think we have to give leadership the actual work to do to the system to create the conditions. We have to provide them with a plan. We have to measure progress against it, and we have to demonstrate results. The trust the teams is addressed by us leading Agile organizations by showing how to make trustworthiness around the transformation and trustworthiness around the teams. So to me, it's not a methodology question. It's a, how are you leading the organization to where they need to get to be able to respond to the customer at market speed in a sustainable way. So Brooke, that's my topic, and without questions, I'm ready to give it back to you. If we could get any questions or feedback, I'd be happy to answer them. I'd left space in this for the conversation. I don't know if we're just not getting the right feedback or not.
Yeah, definitely. We have time for questions and answers. So if you guys want to come off on mute and ask any questions that you have, we've got some time for a live Q&A session.
Hey Dennis, I've got a question.
Hey Heather.
This is Heather. When you're talking about applying these four things, it makes a whole lot of sense. How do you help leadership understand at this level if they're focused really on the tactical of just getting the project out? We don't have time for these strategic high-level things because we're too busy trying to get our projects out.
So I can tell you what we do because it's kind of what our practice is. So I'm not selling it as an offer, but I'm just telling you how we go about doing it. There's a thing called the trust influence loop. I don't have the slide in here, but I can probably get one if you ask for it. But we talk about the challenge is that we tend to, when we communicate with executives, we don't have empathy for the problem they're solving for, and we can't create an aligned point of view on what has to be true for them to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. I think many times we sell Agile as a way of being agile, or as an end in and of itself, or we sell Agile as a magic bullet without creating safety for how we're going to get there and what has to be true. We also don't make it clear how they have to participate. So I will walk in and go, hey, let me get some basic, just foundational things clear for you. Organization, and just work with me. Tell me if you think this is true or not. Organizations that are project-based, where you spin up a project around something and you tear the team down at the end, tend to have three problems. They tend to have poor performing after project performance on the platforms that they built, because the people that built it aren't responsible for the thing. We tend to be less responsive to the market for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And we tend to have to rebuild an understanding of the market and the customer all the time. There's a lot of latency and churn in that. Have you seen that happen before? Yes, because they will have seen that. So let's talk about why that exists. That exists because people are getting paid to finish the project, not for something sustainable. So the lack of a persistent teaming structure, lack of persistent ownership can cause problems there. When we know, and there's nothing new about this today. We know that when people are working on 37 things on new product development processes, that the work is not linear. And when we segment the work into silos, there's an awful lot of back and forth and churn that creates a lot of rework and a lot of noise, and people have to operate from a lot of assumptions. So we know that's true. We can show you research around cross-functional teams or what they call interdisciplinary teams, what a lot of the actual research is around interdisciplinary teams versus silo teams, functionally silo teams. We know that teams working together solve this better. Here are some examples of where that happened. When we had that big crisis with customer X last year, and we all swarmed around it for 4 months, look at how smoothly that went, and how well we produced that work, and how we were able to overcome a lot of organizational obstacles to get there. The design of our organization makes it impossible to operate that way typically. A organization that's designed around teams will work that way more frequently. There's a game that I play with them, Heather, with sugar packets, where I take like a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and I show them, look, when you're working on all the pink and blues and yellows at the same time, nothing's going to get delivered until they're all delivered. There's no adaptability in it because you're working everything at the same time. There's no way to learn or pivot because we have to operate from our earliest understanding, and any disruption, anything disrupts everything. What if I went all the yellows, all the blues, all the pinks? And they'll go, okay, that makes sense. So what I'm doing is I'm going back to sort of first principles about flow of work, decision making, and team design, and having them see that when you build an organization this way, it's going to operate that way. Build an organization this way, it's going to operate that way. It's more desirable for your be able to respond to the customer at market speed in a sustainable way to operate in this other case where you can. Most executives get that. Most executives are reading the literature and HBR and all the industry stuff, and everybody's going, you got to go agile, you got to go agile, you got to go agile. They don't actually understand what it takes. And they think it's about training or something that happens in technology. So it's just about educating them on frames and first practices and underlying beliefs. And then, so we get access, we empathize with their problem. You have a need to move at market speed in a sustainable way, but you can't spend $1 billion. It's risky to you to do this because you don't know what it looks like to get there. You have a lot of concerns around this, but let's just get to this point of view. Do you agree that if we could have a team-based organization that was relatively persistent with really, really clear connection to the customer and really, really good feedback, like that we could probably, and do that in the most important places, that we could better respond? Like, you understand the challenges, why this is there. in order for you to achieve your goals, we have to make these things happen. So here's the plan. I need you to help me form teams, and then we can give them like a very intentional program managed plan. That program managed transformation plan is so important to getting permission to move first. Moving in small slices and reducing risk for them is so important to getting to move at all. And then being able to demonstrate results to them in a financial way, in a throughput way, and in a progress way. All three of those is how we get more success. You don't earn it like all at once. We put together a strategy to go earn their trust a little bit at a time till they support the bigger organization. Because we have to have empathy for why they reject it, right? They've got a business to run. They've got to get things done right now. They have tons of pressure on them from customers. They've already made all these commitments, and they don't understand how to get to a place where this new nirvana, wonderful world will help them do that. So we have to give them a path. It's a change management problem and a trust problem, an earning trust problem. It's not a convincing them harder that Agile's better. Is that helpful at all, Heather?
Yeah, it does. I think it also highlights that some of the challenges, I'll say this, the leaders that I'm working with do not feel that we have a need for change. We're working just fine, even though this is the way that we've been working for the last 50 years.
Well, is it true? Are they able to meet the market, move at customer space in a sustainable way?
Oh, heck no.
Okay, then what we need to do is start to put the measures in place to demonstrate the reality of their world, and then start to teach them the way to move those metrics to it. What probably happens though, and this is fascinating, that the psychology of organization is fascinating. We don't want to show the metrics that shows that our code is corrupt, or that we're not able to meet commitments, or that we're not moving at the rate that we want to. We don't want to show that because they think it's IT's fault that it's that way. So we won't use the evidence that things are not perfect to get them to participate in making it better, but we can't make it better without getting them to participate. So how do we create safety to expose that? We got to measure it, and then we have to create safety to expose it, and then come up with an experiment to go improve it.
Yeah, and that makes a whole lot of sense. You know, we're fighting up against a little bit of a little bit of a rah-rah culture. Nothing negative should ever be said.
Yeah. So the job is to work on all. There's always an improvement to make. Like one way to go and say it is, hey, here's a next level of improvement we can make on everything you've done that's working so great that you've run for the last 20 years, because of new technologies and because the markets are shifting because of this. Here's now an improvement we can make to be even better. Like that might be a way to tell the story. Let's go try and experiment, see if we could be even better on top of what you've done. And that's an empathy play, right? We got to play into what they believe. They believe what they've done in the past is correct. Until you can walk their inference ladder down to why they believe that, to what the core is, and then walk them back up to a new way of thinking, they don't think they need to do something different. They just need to do harder. Right? Literally one of my clients had, yeah, so that's take it apart. So data, an experiment, how you position it, but you have to get those leaders to move with you, because if you do it down and just hope that they're going to, I think the build it and they will come model, it will get torn apart over time. All right, any other questions? I appreciate the question, Heather. All right, any feedback on the talk? Anybody think that what I said is just complete crap, or anybody disagree with my point of view? I'd love to get that feedback. All right, if you want to get our conference, Elevate Agile, free access to a series of talks, send system or scan the QR code. We'd be happy to continue to help educate in this area. And we really appreciate the audience today. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the opportunity, Brooke.